Hey, campfire crew, let's get it on.
Listen to the Hairs on the Back of Your Neck by Skull's Eye. My girlfriend and I were months away from being parents for the first time, and we were both working jobs. I worked in retail as a key holder. She was working as an assistant manager at a place in the local strip mall. After my shift one day, I took the deposit bag, wrapped it up in my work clothes, and put all of that in a bag, and I went to walk the 5 or so minutes to my girlfriend's work. Just before I got to the door of the mall, a man came up and asked me if I could help start his car. He needed to get to work, but he couldn't do it himself. Growing up, my family had cars like that, so I was like, damn air intake or whatever, and said I'd help. We walked around the corner of the mall to where a car was sitting. That's the car I'm going to help start, I thought to myself. The man said, we need to just get in and I'll drive you to my car I need help starting. Hairs on the back of my head started to rise. I have ignored gut instincts before, and that's how I am with this girlfriend at the time. But this is a sensation that was very clearly telling me, ignore these physiological warnings at your certain peril. I quickly explained to him that I thought this was going to be a very quick thing, and I had to be somewhere else I needed to be, and I was already late. I apologized and walked away from him into the mall, and watched him leave in the car before going to my girlfriend's workplace. I told her we were going to scrap our plans for dinner and make it home ASAP, dropping the deposit bag on the way. As we were crossing the parking lots to head to the bank in a roundabout way, we saw the same dude who was, in a hurry to get to work, slowly driving around a Target parking lot just scoping people out. There is no doubt in my mind I certainly would have regretted getting into a car with that man that day. There's a good chance I wouldn't be able to type this story out. Someone is Watching Me by Brilliant Beck's 1992. I've had people stalk and follow me before, and because of that and my true crime addiction, I've become supremely paranoid and a solid curtain twitcher. I'm a 31-year-old female and reside in an upstairs room that was my first room to myself as a child. I had to leave a bad situation and therefore ended up back at my childhood home. For reference, when our house was built, we were told that the field to our left, with horses and a barn at the time, would one day soon be a development. It was 2000 when we were told that, and it wasn't until 2022 that roads started being formed and foundations laid. I'd already had someone follow me home before when I was young, but I was in a different bedroom next door. My parents put in a free library that's right below my window, and nighttime security lights that are very bright, and they turn on if you're within like 20 feet of the side of my house my room is on. I'll admit, having an open field next to me so long made me accustomed to not closing the curtains when I change, because there was never anyone to watch. Now, there is. For the past 2 weeks, the burglar lights next to the free library have been going off late at night. Because my one side of the curtain is open so I can use my vape, that's the only reason I noticed at all. I didn't think too much at first. We lock all the doors and windows every night, and I'm on the second floor. I also always looked out to see if it was a car, someone walking their dog, or a deer, only to see nothing. To add to it, they put in a shit ton of streetlights around this area, so visibility is great. But it just kept happening. So last night I did my usual, and I saw the lights come on out of my peripheral. I acted natural, giving full view out the window I was going to bed. It was about 3 a.m. Turning the TV off, closing the window and curtains, and turning the light out. Then I ducked down, peering through the curtains to the sidewalk below. I honestly thought I was going to pass out when, after a few minutes, maybe 5, someone came out from the side of my house, all silhouette, dressed in black. They kept their back to me until the light turned off, but I swear I could still see them standing there, looking up like they could see me. I called the police, but while I was on the phone with the operator, I saw whoever it was run off. There wasn't much they could do except say they'd have a car drive around and look. My parents were asleep, and I know I would have to tell them the next day. That scares the crap out of me. If it hadn't been happening for weeks and was a solo incident, I would probably be fine about it. But the fact that the light has been going off without me seeing activity, and what happened tonight, makes me think this person has been watching me and watching my house. So, to the person outside my window, let's please never fucking meet. A small update. I did tell my parents, and at first they brushed me off, claiming that I had had a couple of drinks and it was late, so I probably just saw someone checking out the library. I then had another conversation about it with just my dad, who said that there have been reports the last couple of weeks of car break-ins, and since my car is parked on my side of the street right outside my window, maybe they were trying to break into it. I pointed out that if whoever it was trying to get into my car, why was he pressed up against the house where he wasn't visible from my window? And why did he at no point go towards my car? I think I freaked him out enough that we are going to potentially get a camera for that area. Given all the development happening around us, I think it's smart even without this incident.
A Near Home Invasion While Staying Alone by Leafs Do Better. I'm a 21-year-old female. I'll be the first to admit that I have had a very can't happen to me complex, and that's kind of what occurred in this story. I'm a university student and live in a rental house with 5 other people. It's far from ideal. But in this housing outcry that we're living in, it takes that sting off of us having to pay a bunch of money a month to exist in a box. That has relevancy, I swear. I got extremely lucky last weekend when the 5 other roommates I had were all out for the weekend. That had never happened, so I was ecstatic to have the house to myself. I did the whole 21-year-old girl Home Alone stuff you can think of. Watching movies with the volume loud, taking long-ass showers, and walking around the house without a bra, etc., etc. It was around 10 p.m. and I had finished some homework and was relaxing with a glass of wine and watching some streaming services. It sounded briefly like there was something moving on the porch. We've had a fox in our yard before, and the thing used to make a lot of noise on our porch, so I assumed that to be the case. After hearing some fumbling the second time, I went over to check through the window. There was nothing there. As I was turning to head back to the living room, a piece of cement flew through our kitchen window. I didn't know it was cement at the time, but that's not important. I think I peed myself a little when it happened, but I definitely screamed like a little girl. My moronic ass started unlocking the door to go outside, but common sense seized control of me again and I locked the door. I also ran to the back door to make sure it was still locked, even though it's glass and it wouldn't have made a difference. Oddly enough, at this time, my grandma's words came into my head about something her own mother had told her. If someone tries breaking into your house, turn the lights off. You know the inside of your house better than they do. I shut the lights off in the living room and managed to turn the TV off, which was hard because my hands were shaking. My dad used to give me and my siblings advice on protection measures, which were not resonating at this time. I secured myself in my upstairs bedroom, roast me if you want, and had turned all of the lights out in the house as I passed them. While walking up the stairs, I could hear the doorknob shaking furiously from the front door. I didn't know if there was more than one person or if they realized they couldn't jump the fence to get into the backyard. While calling for emergency services on speaker, I secured my hunting knife to the end of my hockey stick with hot pink duct tape. I know, that's probably one of the most Canadian things I could say. If I was going to have to use it, at least it would look fabulous. I stayed in the dark holding my makeshift spear for what was probably about 15 minutes. I'm really glad I wasn't being murdered in that amount of time. The operator told me police were coming, which they eventually did. It took a very unsettling amount of time. The only reason I left the bedroom in the first place was because I heard knocking on the door downstairs, and the police lights were flashing through the window. Otherwise, someone would have had to come in and physically pull me out of the room. A statement was given, but that's all they took. I mean, literally all they did. Literally Literally all they did. Nothing else. Literally that. A very nice female officer stayed with me in the house and helped me clean up the glass until my brother showed up to bring me to his place for the rest of the weekend. So, shout out to Officer Cutie with the tattoos. I made an appointment with a doctor to get on an anxiety medicine as well as medicine for nightmares. I know I wasn't in any physical danger at that point, but I've had some very charming dreams about similar scenarios, and I was just finding it easier to stay awake. Maybe that's juvenile of me, but I'm human. My meds are working fine, and I'm back at my house with wall-to-wall people again. And honestly, I don't hate that so much anymore. Uncle Josh note, I knew this story was from a Canadian before I even read it, just by the username alone. Leafs do better. Yeah, the Leafs do need to do better.
The Creaking Through My Night Shift by Beautiful Pianist 34. I decided to tell some of my personal stories, and maybe this will get it out of my system a little bit and entertain the folks in this sub. Keep in mind, English is not my first language, so sorry for any mistakes. A bit of context for you. I have a side job as a security guard in which I do a night shift once a week. Once a month we have a meeting, me and the other guards. We work in a school with approximately 100 students. It's a 2-story house with a patio. On this specific day, we had a meeting just before my shift, business as usual, camera maintenance, discussion of work-related situations, and some jokes. At the end, when everyone was leaving, a piece of the office's ceiling fell, which is odd, but nothing really strange. I managed to put it back together when my shift started and carried on. As expected, it was quiet after the guys left, and I noticed that the music player that we always keep on was off. For clarification, it's a habit that one of our colleagues have, and we just went along with it. A kind of a feng shui thing. He insisted on keeping the small MP3 player in our office always playing classical music at a low volume, and we respected that. He's the only one who touches it. And I swear, it's always on. But on this night, it was off. I decided to see what had happened to it and turn it on again. It was a little dark because I turned most of the lights off, so it was hard to see the player's visor if it was on or not. I stuck my face on it, and all of a sudden the goddamn MP3 player started to play Wagner really loud. I got scared, and I jumped. Jumped really high like a cat. It was a true jump scare. It's one of those nights, I thought after taking a breath. I took some time looking through the cameras and watched the neighborhood dispersing little by little. The office is on the second floor and we can see the street. Also, the neighborhood is a little bohemian and we have a bar next to the school. Nothing unusual, besides from the feeling of being watched. I shrugged that off and went to my activities. Drink coffee, watch the cameras, read a book. 2 a.m. came. Time for my rounds. The lights were off, everything was dark, and I was instructed to keep it that way. I got out of the office and began to walk through the hallway, and it's normal to hear some creaking from the building. But this time, there was this creak following me through the hallway. It wasn't from the ceiling, the floor, or another place. It was right beside my ears or behind my head, along with the already mentioned feeling that someone or something was following me. I looked around, but there was only the dark. But the creaking followed me through the classroom, creaking close around me all the way to a door that led me to the first floor. And the stairway is in the open, and the creaking stopped, but not that feeling. I went through the patio, making my way to the door that led me back to the building, and the creaking started again. The balcony out there was smelling like there was something rotting, so I looked around, but there was no sign of food or bugs. I even checked the trash cans. Nothing. The cafeteria had the same smell, but not as intense, and no physical evidence of anything. But the creaking. As soon as I got to the workshop in the back, something fell in the dark. I shined my light in the direction of the noise with my flashlight, and I see some scrap metal on the floor, but I don't know what caused it to fall. All this time, I'm trying to breathe steadily and keep myself calm. I was not only afraid, but I was angry. By this time, I wanted to face whatever was bugging me. The last stop, the warehouse. Let's see if the brooms are okay. I opened the door and a broom fell, turning the light on, which I immediately turned off. I was angry. I meant it. If it now wanted light, I wanted the dark. I made my way back to the office and realized that the creaking finally had stopped. I felt that I was alone. The night remained calm after that. I'm not sure what happened, but that's it. Just another strange day at work. I Thought He Was My Friend by Pockytown. Junior year of high school, my parents got a job offer out of state, and so I was forced to move all across the country. I started a new school late into the academic year, mid-March, and had a hard time fitting into the new school. All I wanted was to make a friend, but was too shy to talk to anyone. It was around this time that my friends left MySpace to join Facebook, so I did the same to keep close to them. Some days later, I received a friend request from David. David was a guy that I had been friends with in my old town. Well, he wasn't exactly my friend, but rather the friend of another friend. My friend Jerry had introduced him to the group and would bring him along every time all of us hung out. We knew that David was a year older than us and that he had gone to a different school, but other than that, we really didn't know anything about him. In fact, we kind of always just referred to him as Jerry's friend because he never even bothered to talk to any of us. So when I received a friend request from him on Facebook, I was more than confused. He had hardly spoken to me when I had lived near him, so for him to want to be friends with me after all of this time just seemed a little strange. But I was so lonely and desperate for friends, I didn't care. Other than that, nothing really seemed off about him, at least not at the time. Looking back, I do remember that he hardly had any pictures or friends when I first accepted his request. But like I said, this was around the time that people had just started using Facebook, so it didn't seem all that weird for him to have such a barren profile. And over the years, his friend list got a lot bigger, even more so than mine, so I really didn't think anything of it. But anyway, I digress. I accepted his friend request, and it was just like this that David and I became friends. He told me that he had just started university and that he was lonely because he was too shy to make friends. I told him that I was having a hard time in my new school for the same reasons, and we bonded over that. Little by little, we started talking more. He shared his problems with me, and I shared mine with him. And when it was time for me to apply to university, he even helped me out. He taught me how to sign up for my SATs, ACTs, and helped me apply to scholarships, and even paid for one of my application fees, using a Visa gift card so I didn't receive any of his personal information, and he didn't receive any of mine. Then, when I finally started university, he helped with that as well. He told me where to buy books, gave me studying tips, provided emotional support. So when he asked for my phone number, I didn't even hesitate to give it to him. David was my best friend, and I wanted to keep him close, even if we were physically away from each other. It was around this time that David started sharing more of his life with me, and all of it was pretty normal stuff. He had a job at Pizza Hut, which he hated, but needed to keep in order to pay for bills. He also played soccer, but not for his university or anything. It was just a group of guys that got together on the weekends to unwind. I think the biggest thing he told me was that he had flunked out of university, and that I was the only one to know that because he was too embarrassed to tell anyone else. And at one point, he also had to move back in with his mom, which he hated a lot. 2, maybe 3 years into our friendship, my family decided to take a trip back to the city where we had lived prior to moving all across the country, and I excitedly told him and all of my old high school friends. Most of them were pretty excited about the idea of all of us hanging out together again, because after high school, we had all just gone our different ways. But when I contacted David about it, he showed little interest in hanging out with us. I thought it was weird. I wasn't some stranger he had met online, but rather someone who had been in his life for many years. I kept insisting and asking for a reason, and then he finally gave me one. He told me that his pictures had been heavily edited, and that he was afraid of disappointing me if we met in real life. I told him that it didn't matter what he looked like and I just wanted to meet him, but he still didn't want to hang out. Instead, he just started being a huge dick to me. He knew exactly what buttons to push, knew all of my insecurities and secrets, and had started using all of that knowledge to hurt me. So I just stopped talking to him. Some weeks later, I met my friends as planned, and much to my surprise, I see David there, looking just like he did in his pictures. I didn't understand why he had lied about photoshopping his pictures, or why he said he didn't want to meet me only for him to show up at our friend's house. But I was so angry with him that I didn't ask any questions. I just kept waiting for an apology, but David wouldn't approach me. He was treating me like he treated me back when we were in high school. I was really upset, but given that he had been such a huge dick to me, I just figured that this was just another attempt at getting under my skin. We were all drinking and talking about what we were up to, and when it was his time to share, he pretty much just said the same things I already knew about him. He said that he wished he was still in university like the rest of us, but that he had flunked out and that he was just living with his mom. He said that he was miserable there and that he wanted to move out, but that his job at Pizza Hut wasn't paying him enough for him to move out on his own. At this point, though, I was already pretty pissed off, and the alcohol had given me enough courage to finally ask him why he had been ignoring me. He apologized, but admitted that he hardly remembered me, which hurt my feelings, but also pissed me off even more. I told him about Facebook and about our text messages, and he just kept insisting that he didn't use Facebook. Apparently, he had used MySpace at one point, but had stopped using that and he had switched over to Tumblr. A Facebook account was something that he hadn't even considered making. I asked him about the text messages, and he just said that I probably had him confused with another David because he had never had my number. I thought that denying it was a lousy excuse, but Jerry backed him, which pissed me off even more. The thing, though, was that David hadn't just been talking to me on Facebook, but also to a bunch of us. So when we kept calling him out on his shit, he just told us to text this David guy to prove that it wasn't him. He set his phone on the table, and I texted him, but no new messages appeared on his phone. Then, while we were all arguing about how we need to give it some time, the David that I had been talking to for years responded, proving that we had been talking to a fake all along. Things turned pretty awkward at this point, with all of us feeling angry and betrayed, and David obviously feeling extremely violated. So with all of us wanting answers, we opened up our friend's laptop and searched for David's profile on Facebook. The first thing that David pointed out was that whoever this was, they were using his mother's maiden name and not his real last name, and that while most of the people on his friend list were people that he knew in real life, none of them were people that he had kept in contact with. His display picture was also of a dog which he had owned years ago, but that had since died, just like the fake David had told me. All measures that, looking back, I'm guessing were used by this person to keep David's close friends from actually finding him on Facebook. The older pictures on Facebook had been taken from his MySpace back when he had still been using that, but most of the newer ones had been taken from his Tumblr, which he apparently uploaded pretty often. The weirdest thing, though, was that there were some pictures he swore he had never seen before. They were all pictures of his soccer games taken from the audience, which the fake David had said his brother had taken. The real David said his brother never went to his games, and neither did any of his family members or friends. Further exploring his own fake profile, David pointed out that while a bunch of status updates were of things that had never happened, a lot of them were accurate. Whoever this person was, they had been watching David for a long time. They knew his schedule, knew what movies he had gone to, knew what ice cream flavors he liked, knew his favorite bands, knew practically everything about him. We did confront the fake David, but he never answered the text messages and instead deleted the profile before we had the chance to examine it any further. So we never did get any answers. I don't know why that person pretended to be David for so long, or why they even did it in the first place. All I know is that I felt extremely violated for having shared so many private details of my life with him. And of course I also felt a great deal of pity for the real David. I wondered for the longest time how this person found him, and how they managed to learn so many private details of his life. Then, a few months back, my mother called me saying that she had found a profile with her name, but my pictures on it. My middle name is my mom's first name, something that very few people know. She thought that I had made a second profile, and I didn't tell her the truth because I didn't want to scare her. But the truth was that I didn't even know that profile existed. I have always kept Facebook set to private, and I no longer accept random friend requests, nor do I post pictures anywhere else. So this profile only had really old pictures of me, and nothing weird like David's soccer game pictures. But it was still active, and had been active for a while. None of the friends were people that I know, and none of the updates were of things that I'd been doing in real life. So I don't know if the profile belonged to the same person that stalked David, but I'm extremely average-looking, so I don't know why anyone would want to use my pictures when there are way prettier girls online. So I'm guessing it had to be him. I don't know. I just reported the profile, and it no longer exists. But I wonder if this person is still pretending to be me, or if they've moved on to somebody else.
Joey Crack by Simulation Error. This happened while I was in my early 20s. My best friend was always getting into risky shit. While she did various drugs, I was always more of a pothead. When they say pot was a gateway drug, I believe it's true to a certain extent with those who have addictive personalities. My friend definitely developed an addiction issue later on. My friend's name was KK, and was always down to meet people. She used to friend random people on Facebook or Instagram. She would ask me to hang out, so that way when she met people, I was the buffer, just in case they didn't like each other. One day she came over to my house unannounced and was like, "Hey, let's go to my uncle's house," because her aunt was there and her aunt had some goods. Her aunt happened to be down the road, and her aunt and uncle were known as dealers in the area. So we went. When we got there, she was like, "Hey, I met this guy online. He goes by Joey Crack." Then she showed her aunt his pictures. It was a wide-set man with a red, goofy face, cornrow braids, face tattoos, and a gold grill. I laughed and said, "Wow, Kay, you really know how to pick 'em." She had already invited him over, so upon his arrival, he then came out of nowhere and just walked right up and gave Kay a hug, and everyone else there a kiss on the cheek. This part of town there was nothing around, just houses, a school, and some woods. The closest store was about 20 minutes, so it struck me as odd that he walked there. It was me, Kay, her aunt, and her aunt's friend. We sat around and got 3 joints in rotation, and by this time both aunts were high as a kite on coke. They took a few puffs, then went inside the house, leaving me, Kay, and Joey Crack outside. Joey then started asking us questions like how we knew each other, what we do for a living, etc. It was getting late, so I was telling her that I was going to go home, and she was like, "No, don't go yet." I told her I was tired, and that Joey is weird, and he kept low-key hitting on me. She then told me he asked to sleep with her, and he wanted to ask her if I was down. I laughed it off and said, "You're crazy." And after a while of silence, I deflected and heard some noise that was in the darkness. "You heard that?" I said. After a bit of small talk between him and Kay, he learned that neither one of us was interested, and it was just a hangout. That then turned the mood, and you could feel it. It was suddenly just eerie. He got reserved and shifty-eyed. I sat down for a while just to please Kay, and at one point I turned to Joey, knowing he walked here and it was dark by now. "What are you about to do? Because I'm about to go home, and Kay's coming with me." He was like, "I just texted my boy, and he's about to come get me." While he was texting, Kay was right behind him watching him text. Her eyes grew wide, and she looked at me. That was silent girl code for, "Bitch, what the fuck?" Kay broke the silence and was like, "Hey, come help me get this thing from inside to bring it out." So I did, and we went inside, and she was like, "I'm going to call my uncle so he can take us to your place." I just asked why. My house was like a 10-minute walk. She said because when she was looking at Joey text,
He sent to whoever he was texting to come pick him up with all this information about all of us. He noted that our aunts were high on coke, along with our age. He was telling his boy to come over to basically rob and rape us, and he called dibs on the blonde one. I was the blonde one. Every hair stood up on my body with the thought of some gross goon trying to have his way with me, and I was mad because she got me into this shit. We came back out and continued our conversation with him so he wouldn't get suspicious. Kay mentioned out loud that her uncle was on his way home, and as her uncle pulled in, a sigh of relief came over me. They spoke briefly, and Joey then departed into the darkness before his ride even showed up. Kay and I did get a ride from her uncle to my house, and on the ride we noted how weird Joey was. Later that night, as I was going to bed, I checked my Facebook, and I had a friend request from Joey, and a message. "You're so pretty. I would love some time alone with you without your friend." The message ended with his number. I never blocked someone so fast. After this, Kay didn't learn her lesson, but that's another story for another time. A week later, Joey was in the news. He was wanted for sexual assault, robbery, and drug possession. A bullet well missed on my part. My dad accidentally solved a murder by Blue Tarp Horror. Spring 2014 was a slow season for my father's business. The weather was nice and the roads were clear, which meant slow shifts at an auto shop. It was mid-April around 4 p.m., and the wind was pulling in a nice spring breeze when my dad, Bill, was walking along the side of his shop. It happened to overlook a small stream and running trail, which he enjoyed gazing at near the end of his shift. The side of his building ran along the top of a steep hill which turned into the path. He heard a ruffling in the wind, and about halfway down the hill he saw a big blue tarp. Being very proud of his business and its appearance, he started to climb down the hill. He was just about to grab for it, maybe about 15 feet away, and toss it in the dump, when he saw a car pull into the lot. He turned around and went to help his customer. When 5:30 rolled around, he closed up and went home, forgetting the tarp. The next afternoon, Bill was sitting in his office when 3 policemen came in. They asked my father and coworkers a bunch of questions about any suspicious behavior they might have seen. Side note, my dad is extremely charismatic and friendly. He oftentimes talks people into sharing information with him that they really shouldn't. He looks like someone you can trust, and you can, and he seemed to always have the insider details about things like this. He used his humor to make people feel comfortable, which helped getting strangers to open up to him. Anyway, so Bill and his coworker Hank were talking with a female police officer when she let it slip that a body had been discovered just down the hill. "Oh shit, I was just down there yesterday cleaning. I didn't see any body though," Bill said. "Around what time? Did you happen to see a large blue and white tarp while you were cleaning the area?" the policeman asked intensely. Actually, yeah, I almost grabbed it yesterday, but I ended up getting distracted." She asked him more questions about what time, what he saw, etc., when he asked her if the body was found in the tarp. Yeah, it was. A woman jogging found it this morning around 10:30. My dad was floored. He was just there yesterday. After a few more questions, the police all headed to the crime scene to finish the initial investigation. No one was allowed on the scene, and the police were asking that passers-by not take any pictures. Flash forward a few days. The police went back to my father's shop. They noticed the security cameras set up around the building, and they were hoping that they might catch something on tape. While transferring the data over, my dad started asking more questions about the murder. He learned that it was a middle-aged man that had been stabbed to death. Not much to go on, as it seemed. "Hey," Bill started saying, "you know there are a couple of meth heads that live in this shack behind our shop. It's connected to that bar?" Then Bill started talking about his own predictions for the whodunit scenarios. The officer nodded, gathered the rest of his things, and left. "Hey, Hank, let's go down there, see if we can find anything cool," my father whispered to his coworker. All right, I guess it couldn't do any harm, Hank replied hesitantly. They started down the hill where the trench was found. The grass was flat and the tarp was now gone. They walked around for 15 minutes or so when Bill headed up the stream a little ways. The trail runs under a main road and then leads to a man-made lake. Just under the bridge, the water starts to get heavier and the trees are a bit thicker. He noticed a red Lowe's card in one of the trees. I'm taking that for the shop, he thought, as he ran over to pull it out of the stream. Calling over Hank for help, the two of them pulled it out and started wheeling it back up the hill. Suddenly my dad stopped. He saw something on the cart. He thought, what is that rusty-looking stuff? Hank, stop. Look at the fucking cart. Is that blood? They looked closer, and sure enough, blood. It was on the handle, on the wheels inside. But it wasn't only blood they started to notice. Hair. Human hair. Utterly stunned, my dad called the policewoman he had been talking to the previous day and explained what they had found. For whatever reason, the PD were very skeptical that this was evidence. At first, they didn't even believe my father. When he told them that it made no sense to make up, they sent out a car. There were 2 police officers and a CSI. The CSI asked my dad why he thought it was blood. Well, it looks like blood, sir. I'm not sure, the CSI said. How do you know that that is human hair, he asked. Because it looks like human hair, my dad snapped. Why did this guy seem so hesitant? They used a chemical test, and sure enough, it tested positive for human blood. They took the card as evidence and thanked my dad. Again, my dad tried to give his opinion on who the mystery killer might be. He suggested again that they talk with the crazy neighbors behind his auto shop. Still, no information was taken down, and they left with what they had. 2 more days passed. My dad was leaving the shop to get some things from Costco. There's a small dirt alley that leads to the main road just behind his work. In the past, it had been blocked by one of the meth addicts' cars. They were complaining to my dad and his boss about the business driving cars back and forth through the alley, disrupting them. He noticed the alley was open and decided to take the shortcut to his destination. But something was off. He saw the usual blocked car sitting in front of the shack. The door was wide open, and there was someone sitting on their knees with their upper body inside the car. He got in his car and crept up just a little bit so he could see what was happening. He right away recognized the skinny red-headed woman as the female that lived in the shack. It was the shack guy's wife or girlfriend, he didn't know exactly. She was on her hands and knees surrounded with hard chemicals. Bleach, Comet, OxyClean, and much more. My dad had said that he knew right then that they were guilty. For one, why would someone be scrubbing their car with straight chemicals? No water, no rinsing. It was the middle of the day on a hot June afternoon. Second, they happened to be only 2 blocks away from a local car wash. He said it felt off, and he knew to trust his instincts. The woman just kept scrubbing and scrubbing the passenger side floor. He pulled out his phone and started recording her. Now, he's known this woman and her significant other for a few years. Like I said, they complained about my father's workers, and he complained about their dogs on and off for a long time. It was all harmless bickering. My dad, always trying to be the funny guy, yelled out his window as he was driving past. Covering up a murder? He laughed and drove away, hearing her say, "Fuck you," as he drove off. This time when he called the police, they took it very seriously. He explained that she was cleaning the car aggressively and that it seemed like she was trying to bleach something out of the car. The next day, the PD went by to talk with the residents of the shack. The day after that, they made an arrest. After searching the shack, they found a large blood stain soaked into the plywood floor. Once the blood was seen, the wife, girlfriend, whatever, crumbled and told the police everything. It was her husband or boyfriend, and the victim. The victim was named Rich. He had gone over to their little house to shoot up and get high. Someone ended up accusing Rich of putting some of the dope aside for himself, and things got heated. Eventually, the husband started to physically fight with Rich when he stabbed him. The guy bled out on the floor and died. They didn't know what to do, so they stole the Lowe's cart to move him around, loaded him into the car, wrapped him in the tarp, and pushed his body down the hill. They ditched the car, thinking the river would wash it down far enough that it wouldn't be found. My dad and Hank sat in their car while they watched the police arrest Don, the suspected murderer. My dad took a video of that as well. You can hear my dad very inappropriately yelling out his window, "Ha ha, killer," in that video. Both of the videos were lost when he switched phones. My dad says that he's going to start a PI business. Yeah, right. Because he solved a murder, all on his own. My crazy friend ended up becoming a murderer by Ravenously Red. I had this friend who was really into the occult. Unfortunately, I was the one who got him turned on to it. We had a mutual appreciation of the paranormal and all things weird, so I thought the subject would interest him. He started going deep into the subject to the point where he wouldn't talk about anything else. He would actually interrupt a conversation and force the subject back to occult matters. Rude, but sometimes people go through phases where their interest is all they want to talk about. It was a mostly forgivable offense. I think I should mention that this particular friend didn't have a very large friend circle. His depression and introverted nature kept him inside a lot. He didn't have the best luck in relationships with women. His world was kind of small, and I did enjoy hanging out with him, so I did my best to be a good friend. I didn't want to just brush him off because he was acting a little weirder than normal. Honestly, for the longest time, he was a totally normal guy. We'd chat and play games together on the PlayStation. Sometimes we'd go see movies with my boyfriend accompanying us. We all hung out at the park, we went swimming. Overall, we had a good time hanging out. Things started to go downhill when he started to smoke DMT. Personally, I think psychedelics are amazing tools that can offer insight into your life, but they should be treated with respect. My friend got to the point where he was making it himself, apparently a pretty easy thing to do after a meager amount of research, and he was smoking it daily, multiple times a day. For those of you who aren't familiar with the substance, when you smoke it, you get transported to a different world, an entirely new plane of existence. Your body and yourself doesn't exist anymore, you're just exploring this alternate reality dreamscape. My personal experience with it led me to seeing a dragon once in this kaleidoscope of a cornucopia. People see all kinds of different things. Imagine what that does to a person when they're smoking it 30 times in a day. He started telling me things like he was the reincarnated Osiris. He said he was seeing Egyptian hieroglyphs all over the place in waking life. Apparently, he had hour-long conversations with entities in his bedroom even when he wasn't smoking DMT. Of course, I was very alarmed to hear all of this, and I told him he needed to take a serious break. No drugs at all for a few months so he can find solid footing in reality again. At this point, I was still hanging out with him because he obviously needed some help, and like I've said before, he didn't have a lot of friends that could give him that. He was also the black sheep of his family, so I knew he wasn't getting any kind of support from them. He was really close to his sister, and I did reach out to her on Facebook to express my concerns. I pushed her to talk him into getting some psychiatric help because he was slipping past the point of no return. I'm not really sure if she took my messages seriously since we didn't really know each other. Plus, she was at least 6 years younger than us and possibly didn't grasp how serious the situation was becoming. In any case, I'll jump forward now to the part where things start to get really creepy. My boyfriend had made arrangements to hang out with our friend at the park. I didn't really want to go because I felt like I needed a break from him and his nonsensical ranting. I just couldn't deal with it on that particular day. My boyfriend said he wasn't all that bad, and we went anyway. We got to the park and he was his usual self, ranting about Egypt and made-up gods that only he knew the truth about, etc. He also had this large hunting knife that he kept fiddling with the whole time we were on a walk. He told us that he had been using it in ceremonial magic and that it helped to banish negative thoughts. It made me extremely uneasy. He would do this thing where he would take the knife and make stabbing motions near his heart or head like he was mock stabbing himself, all while holding a conversation with me or my boyfriend. I think we were both really on edge and didn't know what to say or do about it, and I tried to distract him from doing it by bringing up other subjects that might interest him, but he kept on with his ritual. Keep in mind, we were walking on a trail, so it wasn't like we could just say goodbye then and there. We had to walk back to our car and drop him off at his car. My boyfriend had the bright idea that we should get some lunch after our walk, even though I was doing my best to give him a look that said, "No, you crazy fuck. Why do you think I want to spend any more time with this nut?" But it must have not been very effective, or my boyfriend was ignoring it. I'm not sure. Either way, we ended up getting in the car to go get lunch. In the car I was driving, my boyfriend was in the passenger seat and our weirdo friend was in the back. As we were heading through a busy part of town where all the shopping and restaurants are, I heard the distinctive sound of a belt buckle coming undone. Then I heard the worst sound imaginable. I peeked back out of the corner of my eye and my suspicions were confirmed. This crazy fucker was full-on jacking off in our back seat. I mean, pants all the way down, bare ass on the seat, beating it so hard it was like he wanted to rip it off. Instantly, I felt sick to my stomach, and all the nervous energy I had throughout the day popped up into my head. I was trying not to shake and trying to ignore it and drive through heavy traffic. I kind of had a freeze response, I guess. The whole time I kept thinking about that huge-ass knife he had in his pocket, and obviously he was completely off his rocker now. I was afraid to say anything or confront him because I didn't know how he was going to react. This part is nuts, but my boyfriend didn't fucking seem to notice, and the whole time he kept rambling on about God knows what. I couldn't listen because my thoughts were 100% focused on driving and trying to act like I didn't know what was going on in my back seat. We got to the restaurant and my boyfriend ran inside to grab food. I was left alone in the car with our friend, and I tried to act like I was browsing on my phone when really I was watching and listening as hard as I could. We didn't talk. My boyfriend got back and I complained that I was tired, it had been a long day, let's drop him off, etc. So I drove us back to our friend's car, and he didn't get out of our vehicle. He just sat there. I had to get a little bit rude and ask him to please get out and go home. He got out of our car and walked over to his passenger side. I started getting really scared and I suspected the worst. He pulled a gun out of some kind of bag he had on the seat, and he just walked over to our car with it. I don't know why the fuck I did this, but I was so pissed I just got out of my car and walked right up to him. I was maybe 3 feet away and could see it was a loaded 9mm. I kept asking him over and over, "What are you doing?" because apparently that's all my brain could think to do. I told him to get in his car and go home. He never said anything during the whole time. He just kind of cried and had this wild look in his eye. For whatever reason, he got back into his car and drove off. I told my boyfriend, obviously we are never hanging out with him again, and that I didn't even want to talk to him anymore. No contact, nada. A few months passed, and he occasionally messaged me through the PlayStation or texted my phone. He said a lot of random stuff, and I just ignored it. It turned out that he moved down to Tennessee near Nashville. I don't know why. He had a roommate, and I think their girlfriend lived there. I'm not really sure about the situation. I thought maybe he was turning his life around and getting a fresh start down there. I thought it was best to cut all contact and let him regroup. I wasn't interested in any kind of friendship with him, and I knew he needed help beyond what I could offer. Again, I reached out to his sister and let her know that he had a gun. She had managed to get it from him somehow, but it did little good in the end. I got a call around 11 p.m. one night that woke me up. It was a man claiming that he was a detective down in Gallatin, Tennessee, and my heart skipped a beat. I started sweating and immediately asked what happened. Apparently, my former friend stabbed someone to death on Halloween Day. I don't know all the details, and the articles about it are kind of sparse. The whole thing was really surreal, and I was just left feeling like I was lucky I didn't get shot last summer. I'm still feeling creeped out by the whole ordeal, and I'm kind of actually feeling sick after writing all of this. Hey gang, thanks for listening to this episode of Uncle Josh's True Scary Stories. If you have a true scary story of any nature that you'd like to hear narrated on this channel or podcast, email it to unclejoshtruescarystories@gmail.com. I read them all. If you haven't done so, please like, subscribe, and even share this channel with your friends. Make sure you hit the notification bell for each time that I upload, and if you'd like to take your support even further, there's a link to my Patreon below, as well as links to all of my social media, including my TeePublic page. Go check out the merchandise that I have up there. Get yourself a Campfire Crew t-shirt. I had to throw in some of the classics on this one. I spent some time over the weekend listening to some old podcasts and remembered some of these that I really like that I've never shared before. If you've heard them, I hope you enjoyed my rendition of them, and if you've never heard them before, I hope you enjoyed them as well. Everyone, be excellent to each other. And until next time, be wary of things that go bump in the night. It could be anything. A ghost, a monster, or the guy next door.